Amana is our board governance and management expert, and we're excited for her to deliver this. Without further ado, Amana Siddiqui.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you so much for joining. I know in the East Coast it's around 9 p.m. Here in California, we're at 6 p.m., so people are just coming home from work. Rami, if we can go to the next slide. All right, so let me go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Amana Siddiqui, and I am based in Southern California, Fountain Valley to be exact. I have really just been somebody that loves founding things, starting a lot of multiple small businesses. But one of the things that I really hold true to my love is Baraka Cafe at the Islamic Society of Orange County, which I am currently a board member of, our masjid. We have a unique structure, so we can go on about that later. Really building up this coffee shop is something I'm really excited for. And if you're ever in Southern California, please message me and come visit me at ISOC. I am the former CARE California board chair. So I did that for 3 years. I served 6 years on the CARE California board. And previous to that, I served 3 years on the CARE Los Angeles board. So that was about 17 years ago, where I really got my love for board governance and really just love the idea of building something and being part of an organization to do good. And I really love being with everybody in this journey of their masjid growth, of their organization growth. I've have experience in both types of boards and really excited to see what we can go over today in succession planning. So we'll go ahead and start. Okay, today we are going to be setting our intention. I really think it's an important place to start with anything that we do as Muslims. We're going to talk about what is succession planning. We're going to build effective boards and leadership pipelines, and then we'll wrap up with some action steps and reflections. All right, so let's go into this idea of setting intentions. I really hold this dear to my heart because as Muslims, our niyyah and what we do is what we get rewarded with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if we don't have the right intentions, it really does not make us hone in on what we're doing. So I really want to give 30 seconds. I'll give you guys about 30 seconds to look at yourself internally and have your intention for why you are part of the organization that you are a part of. So I'm going to pause for 30 seconds. You can write it down, you can think about it internally, but why are you a part of the organization that you are? Okay, it's about 30 seconds. If anybody wants to share in the chat, you can please write your intention. I'll tell you my intention of being part of Oak Tree is that I really want to be part of what people are doing to build their organizations and really hope that I get the barakah from your organizations for whatever pieces you take from this training. By us setting our intention really does help us drive why we do what we're doing. And if we don't do those intentional and setting intentions, the barakah may not come. So I hope we're all doing this for really the sake of Allah and really for the hereafter. So this is really where, as board members, as leaders, you have to constantly recheck your intention of why you're doing what you're doing. That helps you make sure that you are there for the right reason and also helps you think beyond yourself. One of the things that happens is leaderships is that you start thinking about the leadership as you. And that's really not what we are as Muslims. Our Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was the best example of what it meant to be a servant leader. We'll talk about that in later as well. But really, I hope you guys do figure out and kind of hone in on your intention for the organization that you're a part of. One of the things with setting intention is if you're part of a masjid, uh, is understanding that we are hoping for something bigger. So we'll go ahead and launch the first poll. Actually, the only poll. There's 3 questions. I really want to gauge who's here today. So I want to see if you're part of a masjid, a school, youth group, general nonprofit. Pick one. What's your role? Are you a board member, staff, volunteer, participant? And then how long you've been part of that organization. Okay, we looks like we have a few half and half between masjids and nonprofits. We have some staff, some board members. And we have a lot of people here less than like 1 to 3 years. So is there any founders that would be people above like 5 to 9 years? Okay, I'll give it about 10 more seconds. Okay, so it looks like we have a good mix between masjids and nonprofits. We have a few board members. It looks like we have a few staff and some volunteers. So I really do think it's important for everybody to kind of see where they are, and understanding that your position in your organization will always lead to some type of succession planning. All right, let's go on to what is succession planning. So, when we talk about what is succession planning, can people drop in the chat when I say succession planning? What word comes to your mind? One words. Longevity. All right. So, one of these things about succession planning that always kind of is is hard to think is that you think you are thinking about the future. But when we really do think about succession planning, it's seeing where we are currently. So if we look at the next slide, it's a deliberate and strategic process of identifying, developing, and preparing future leaders to ensure the continuity of governance, mission, and organizational stability with key roles of transition. How many of you guys have done your estate planning? When you do your estate planning, one of the things that comes from that is you realize you have to clean up your house where you are. So, succession planning is not necessarily thinking about the future, it's a big part of it, but it's also seeing where you are currently. So, one of the things that I think is critical for succession planning for any organization, let's go ahead and go to the next slide, is you want to preserve your institutional knowledge. You want to prepare the next set of leaders with the commitment, knowledge, and skills for them to be successful. You want to save a lot of valuable time in trying to find new successors. You want to prevent major disruptions of work and impact to the team and organization. And your goal is to ensure this continuity and performance. Now, when a lot of people in organizations think, oh, okay, this is my religious director, this is my board chair, this is my treasurer. No one can replace them. We have to get away from the mindset of trying to replace people, but rather try to make sure we are making those roles clear so that when the next person comes in, they know where to go. So, one of the biggest things for me in anything that I do is making sure I'm documenting. I'll give you an example. Currently, I am a volunteer and I'm on the board member at Baraka Cafe. And one of the things I'm trying to drive home to all of the staff and to the volunteers is documenting things. Little things like roles and responsibilities. Do we have it documented? Because God forbid, if something happens to my store manager, I need to make sure somebody can come in, know where they are, what's been ordered, who's on shift, and have all of those systems and procedures there for the next person to take over. We always have to think about our organizations without us. When you're doing something, you want to make sure if I leave tomorrow, will this organization be able to know where we are and continue forward? A lot of times, this institutional knowledge is in board members that have been there maybe 10, 15 years, but they never took the time to document how things were, the history, who was on past boards. And there's so many tools that you have right now at your disposal. There are apps, there's different, drives that you can use. Really honing in on that institutional knowledge is key. If you don't have it preserved and you don't have that history, you are leaving your organization to have repeating the same mistakes, right? The one thing I do about growth is that you want to make sure that the new problems that your board or your masjid or your organization are not old problems that you had 10 years ago, right? You want to make sure that they're growing and addressing the new problems that happen with growth, not dealing with funding, right? Our board members, who gave, who didn't give, who are the major donors. Those are kind of things that do need to be institutionalized, and that institutional knowledge needs to be passed down to different boards. One of the key successes to most leaders is knowing where they came from. So we'll talk a little bit about how to get into that best practices within your board and even as a staff. Let's go ahead. One of the biggest things, Rami, we can go to the next slides. So I talked about succession planning as, it's about the future, but it's really about where you are. So we're going to go over four key parts of your organization that you want to make sure are very critical. One, we'll do a board audit. We'll do a financial audit. We'll do a human resource assessment. And then we'll also look at roles and responsibilities for all of the key players in your organization, not just the board, not just the staff, but the entire community in which you are serving as a nonprofit. So we'll start off with board audit. Now, one of the things I really hone in our governance training, and as we go at Oaktree, we do offer these things for nonprofit boards, is really seeing where you are as a board. Does your age of your board members reflect the growth, right? So you want to make sure you are representing a very diverse age group, making sure that not all of your board members are part of one generation, that you really are being intentional on who you're recruiting in your volunteer pipeline to become future board members so that you are constantly having this fresh ideas and new terms that are happening within the age. We want to look at gender. We want to make sure we are getting away from all male board members, and that's really critical in masjids. You are serving half your population if they're female. You need to make sure that you have some type of representation on the board. So if it's mandated 2, 3, it should, in my opinion, be almost 50-50. I can proudly say that my masjid, Islamic Society of Orange County, we do make an intentional effort to make sure that the gender and the age is there. One of the key things is talent. If you can also make sure you're recruiting board members that have talent, if you are looking for a great treasurer, maybe look at your general body to see what treasurers are there, what CPAs, what bookkeepers, any knowledge within that financial sector are people that you want to get on your board. You also want to make sure you have a large enough board to get the work done, right? As a board member, you are basically a volunteer to your organization. You are representing who you are. You're out there fundraising. You are also making sure that you're engaging with the new generation, with new members to come in to hopefully funnel into this pipeline. So the more people there are, a nice number for a board, I would say, depending on the organization, is 7 to 13. My masjid, we have a shura of 17 members, and then we have an EC of 6. So there is a hierarchy within the board to get more work done. Now, a lot of times board term limits can be a very sticky subject. The reason why we want to make sure we have board term limits is that we want to make sure that we're getting new blood in. And that's what helps with succession planning. If you have a board of 10 to 15 people that have been there for 10 to 15 years, no one is going to want to join that board, right? But if you are actively going out based on your bylaws, if you have a membership base, if you have a nominee base, you are out there getting the talent to get into your board, you should feel confident that I'm not going to be on this board forever. One of the best things about being part of Care California and transitioning off is that I felt confident that the new members that were coming in were trained, they know what they're doing, and they're going to take the organization to the next level. So you want to make sure as a board member, you have those term limits and you are not staying there forever. You shouldn't want to be in a board forever. You want to make sure that new talent, new blood is coming in and that you can go in and be the wisdom and the support, not on the board, but as a general member. Another good practice is bylaws. Bylaws are really what holds your organization together, and that's the duty that you have to your state. So if those bylaws should constantly be looked at every 3 to 5 years, and the reason why that's important for succession planning is that if your bylaws are not up to date, the problems that you're having, like let's take an example, my masjid bylaws have not been looked at for 30 years, and we're currently trying to look at them right now. It still says you can vote by fax machine. Right, but it says nothing about that you can vote by proxy through the internet, through DocuSign. So you want to make sure that you're staying relevant and you're not looking at your bylaws and, having people ask, what is a fax machine? That's like even more funny. So we want to make sure that we are staying relevant. And a good practice is to look at your bylaws every 3 to 5 years to stay current and relevant. So that is encapsulating what a board audit is. It's a lot, and you want to make sure you take the time and have either a board member, you hire a institution like Oak Tree, you have somebody come help you gather all that information and get it all centralized in one place. All right, let's go to the next one. Okay, you want to know who's in your organization, right? A lot of times when you join an organization, you want to know who you're serving. So you want to know who the organization leaders are. You want to know who are the founders, who are the main imams that were part of the history. You want to make sure you know who the community leaders are. You also want some masjids have a membership base, and a lot of the times that membership base can be a hindrance to your board recruitment. So you want to make sure you have active people coming into your membership base because that's what's going to build your pipeline. My son, as soon as he turned 18, he registered to vote, and we got him to become a masjid member because it takes 2 years for him to be a general member before he can be part of a committee, before he can be on the board. So theoretically, once he graduates university, he can now be serving on our board, which is the ideal thing that you want to do. You want to get the buy-in of your youth as soon as they can, knowing that I'm going to give to my masjid, I'm going to give to my local organization, and it's important for me to stay part of it, even if they leave. So my son right now currently is not living in the city that we are here, but he comes home, he's part of the masjid. We're like, it's very important for you to make sure that you're part of your masjid, you're part of the updates, and you stay connected. So that's how you build up that pipeline for future leadership. You also want to make sure you know your volunteers. Your volunteers and having an active system of getting volunteers in is very crucial for any organization. Masjids, nonprofits, relief organizations, the volunteers are the ones that are getting the work done on the ground, but you also want them to see what they can become if they stay in your organization. And last but not least, if you're blessed to be able to have staff as part of your organization, you want to make sure that you know who's hired, where they're going, and have this idea of an audit even within your human resources. And we're going to go over that in the next slide. Okay, so we talk about human resource assessment. I really think this is critical because once you grow your masjid and you get out of the term, it's called a working board to more of a governance board. A working board is really you're in the field, you're doing maybe writing the checks, you're doing the financial, you're taking the receipts, but soon you grow and you realize that this is a full-time job. So you start hiring people. Now, the biggest mistake I see masjid boards and new organizations make is not having proper human resources from the very beginning. You want to make sure those job descriptions are there. I would even argue that you want to make sure the job descriptions are there for your volunteers and unpaid staff because you have to think of your organization outside the person. It's not Amana, a part of Baraka Cafe. It is the board member representing the board to Baraka Cafe. So names aren't used. It's that role that's really defined. You also want to make sure salary charts are very clear. You have to make sure you're giving your staff room to grow. You want them to see if I come in entry level, I can grow to be a certain level within the masjid. And that really helps us cultivate talent and even making sure that our volunteers can see a road to possibly being hired in these institutions. And one of the key things for any organization is your org chart. You need to know who reports to who. This can save a lot of headache when people transition off. You don't want a board member to leave and you had no idea that they were managing five people and you had no idea. So that institutional knowledge of, okay, maybe the facilities manager was reporting to a board member. If that board member decides to move and we have no idea that they were actually managing XYZ, things will get lost. So having that org chart, constantly looking at it yearly, quarterly, making sure we need to make any adjustments really does help keep everybody in line and knowing what they're doing. All right, the next one is my favorite. Financial audit. One of the key things to a board is your treasurer. Your treasurer is holding on to so much information. And the hardest thing is to find a new treasurer, right? But if you're on a board and you're starting your first year, and the second year you become a treasurer, you already have to think, who am I going to train to be the next treasurer? Make sure everything is documented. This is the process. This is how we get the receipts. This is who gets paid. That training of that treasurer is really what's going to help with the institutional growth. And honestly, even with growth within your finances, the biggest thing that Muslims complain about is that we don't know where the money is, right? You donate it to your masjid, but you don't know, is the zakat being allocated properly? Are the staff being paid properly? So that treasurer holds on to a lot. But that transparency of being able to give the members or their organization their where their money is going can be tremendous in the growth of your organization. Funders, people that donate, like to know where their money is going. One of the key things, at least in California, we have to do an external audit every year. So a company comes out, looks at your books, and you need to be able to give that and be sure that that's happening. A nice thing about an external audit is that it keeps you in check. So you have this buildup of institutional knowledge within your external audit. You'll know how much donations have increased, how much they've decreased, how much going to salary, how much is going to overhead. These are all things that are really important. And one of the key things as a board member of a nonprofit is your IRS filings. You want to make sure you are doing everything to the letter of the law within your state. It's key because as Muslims and as Muslim nonprofits, we cannot shortcut things. We are really put under our microscope. And so we want to make sure that we are doing everything to the best of our ability. And we can offer those trainings through Oak Tree. Now, let me go on to the next one. Effective steps of succession planning. So let's go, Rami, to the next slide. So there are four steps that are effective for succession planning. Really, this transfer system of how you're going to move once your knowledge and the systems and procedures in place. So as a treasurer, let's take that for an example. Those treasurer documents and training will happen every year. These are things that you need to look at every year, that transfer of knowledge. Are you documenting? Let's say we have a situation that happened at our masjid where there's an HR, and this is the first time it's ever happened. As a board member, you need to say, okay, how did we do this? All right, we talked to our lawyer, we documented, we hired an HR attorney, whatever those steps are, you have that documented and you put it in whatever cloud system or whatever system your masjid has decided. So that the next time, and it's in your minutes, the next time this happened, you say, oh, what? Let's go back and see how we addressed it. You want to make sure you're having effective onboarding and offboarding. When a board member or a staff, they need to get onboarded properly, meaning you give the history of the organization, you have them understand what are the things that are critical to your organization, what your mission is, what your vision is, what the bylaws are. What's the expectation as a board member? You're expected to attend all the meetings. You're expected to be a participant. You're expected to fundraise, right? But this is the key thing I think that doesn't happen is the offboarding. You decide I am going to retire and or I'm moving, and then you just leave. You want to make sure that you're offboarding your board members just as well as you're onboarding. You're getting that institutional knowledge. You are taking away access of email addresses. You're taking away access to documents that are sensitive because that's the things that can help or help make or break an institution. So that offboarding is just as important as the onboarding. And one of the best things to do this is your board secretary. If you haven't met, I haven't really talked about the chair or the vice chair. So far, I've talked about the treasurer, and now I'm going to talk about the secretary. The power of the secretary is so critical to your board. They are holding on to all of this knowledge. They know board term limits. They know the meeting minutes. They know who came in, who came off. That board secretary probably owns most of the institutional knowledge if they're trained properly. And you want to make sure they know how to take minutes. They're not transcribing things because all of those documents can be used in a court of law if anything were to happen. But that's the information that you're going to need to pass on and how you do it. And one of the other things is really to empower and support. The more information you give, the more effective the succession planning will be. And a lot of this is really part of how you want to make sure you're transferring and owning that knowledge, making sure things are not all over the place. All right, let's go on to the next one. So I talked about here, this onboarding. One of the things, at least my masjid does, every time we have a new board that comes on, we stagger. So every every year, 4 new board members come on, and there's about 17. So every year, a new onboarding happens. They do it with a past president that's now volunteered. They do this onboarding process. They welcome them. They tell them the culture of the board. They tell them what they're doing and why they're part and the expectations. You have to come to every meeting. And if you don't, this is the repercussions. It's very plain and it's very black and white. They tell them about the projects that are happening. They're making sure that anybody that was offboarded, now they have that institutional knowledge and they're passing that on. And that yearly training is critical. So wherever it depends on your board and there's best practices. So each board is really different. That's what's so amazing about, the United States. We can figure out, everybody can have different models and there's different ways to do onboarding. And Oak Tree has been able to help with that onboarding process for different boards. And then we'll go into offboarding really fast. So offboarding is really capturing that institutional knowledge. So when I left my board term, I made sure the last 6 months I wasn't actually the chair. I made sure to get everything that I had, all of the documents, all of the sensitive information over to the new board. I really encourage this overlap of limits. So it's really hard if you're the board chair, board secretary, and your term ends and then you're gone. You want to make sure, in my opinion, good practice is to overlap. So you have a transition time where you're giving that knowledge while you still have the ability to see and have access to it. So one of the proper things is like the security of your organization is key. You want to make sure you're offboarding. If you have a board member or a staff member that left abruptly, you want to make sure you have the steps on how to take care of that member. If it's a nice break, then you want to make sure you get all of that information. You take away secure documents. You understand all of those things and proper documentation. I really, really love when boards, and this is why I signed a code of conduct when I joined my board, because there's expectations and I'm held to that standard for that. And then when you're offboarded, the same thing happens. You have to remember it's not the person. You are really trying to make sure that the organization is being taken care of. It's outside who you are. All right, let's go on to the next one. I talk really fast, so all right. So we talk about succession planning. And one of the biggest things is that it happens everywhere, right? We're not here forever. And we have to understand that. We have to figure out how we want to leave. I tell people to think about the organization outside of themselves. If they were to leave and look back and see what they would want to see happen, do they want to be a part of it or they don't want to be a part of it? They're done. They want to have that. So there's different ways to leave. One of them is a clean break. You decide, I'm part of the board and I'm going to leave. No, everything's good, but I really am not going to help that organization anymore. That's a clean break. Nothing happened, but you're really not involved. Then we have a light. So if you're founder of an organization or even a company, you have a light founder role and a significant founder role. Now, with the light founder role, you are part of the organization, but you're not too involved. You're there if they call you, hey, Amana, how did you take care of this situation? Okay, perfect. Uh, Thank you for your time, bye-bye. But I'm really not connected to what's going on. My favorite is a significant founder role. I love when people are part of organizations and they leave, but they're still part of the organization that they were a part of. Uh, you know, I'm still part of Care California, even though I'm no longer the chair. I made sure that things were given there and I was available and still am available to make sure the organization goes to the next level. Inshallah, when I transition off my board, I'm still going to go to my masjid and I'm going to still be there. Just like if you were to have a company, let's talk about Baraka Cafe. I'll give you a personal anecdote. I run a small coffee company called Bloom Espresso. I don't really care if Bloom Espresso keeps going on without me. It's okay if I'm not setting it up to be outside of Amana Siddiqui. When I decide to close it, it's okay. But Baraka Cafe, I am setting it up so that it will keep going beyond me. So I'm thinking, okay, if I'm not here, do they know all of the pieces? Because I'm really praying that inshallah that Sadaq al Jariyah from Baraka Cafe is really my intention. So I want to set it up for me to keep giving. So as a founder, I'm going to stay involved. And the one that's unfortunate is an involuntary breakup, but it's going to happen. There are going to be situations where you're going to have to let go of a board member. There's going to be situations where you're going to have to let go of that staff member. It's okay. And you shouldn't be scared if you follow the proper documentations within your human resources to do that, because sometimes that's hindering your organization from growing, and you have to think outside the people and go beyond that. So really think about how you want to leave. How do you want to be with your organization? Do you want to be involved? Do you not want to be involved? So that helps you figure out how much succession planning you need to do as the individual person. All right. And I think we are, all right. I'm a couple minutes early, so we can go into this final takeaways. Succession planning is stewardship. It's not replacement. You are not trying to find the next person to take so and so's role. You're not trying to see that unicorn that may not exist. But what you're doing is you are setting up the positions with proper documentation. You are making sure that person that you hire, the biggest thing for boards is we need to hire an executive director. We need to hire this person, this one person that's going to magically change everything. It's not like that. You have to make sure you're setting up these roles by having all of those things there. So when they come in, you are giving them that knowledge to take the organization to the next level. So as board members, as, staff members, when you are thinking about yourself, think about yourself when you're not there. I work at Care Los Angeles, and one of the things I always think about is I do a yearly gala, and I try to make sure whatever things that happen at that gala, I solve them so that the following gala, that problem doesn't exist, right? So I am trying to constantly make sure that things are documented and people are going to deal with new problems. All right. Evaluating your current state. HR systems, financial health, leadership capacity. Because I can tell you, when you start hiring staff and you start onboarding more board members, you want to make sure you have all of those key takeaways, that you are giving them as much knowledge and you're setting up for success. In your job, if you started a job and your manager didn't give you any tools, just gave you the masjid and said, hey, fundraise for us, it's not going to be there. But if you go, hey, this is our donor list, we will make sure to help you. As board, we're responsible for XYZ. As ED, you're responsible for XYD. And you have those regular check-ins, it's really crucial to the institutional knowledge. And then you're not thinking about the person, you're thinking about the role. So this is where I'm going next, to building systems, and not just for people. You really want to make sure that these systems are there and you're transferring the knowledge. And there's lots of documentation tools out there. You can use a cloud-based server where you keep things organized. You work with your secretary. If you're blessed to have staff, they can also help you keep that. You want to normalize transition, right? It shouldn't be that the person's president for 20 years, then everybody goes, what's the point of being part of that? Not that people are looking to be president, but if they see that the president's not stepping back and not allowing for new growth, not allowing for, different generations to chime in, it makes it seem almost unattainable. And unfortunately, we're about 50 to 75 years behind, the church system. Churches are closing every day because people aren't going to them. Now, I can tell you, I would be devastated to find out, in 50 years from now, that my masjid closed because there's nobody there to take on the leadership. So you have to remember that we are in a system where the churches at one point in the 1950s were going to be there forever. That's everybody went to church on Sunday. Everybody was part of the community, right? As a masjid, you have to make sure that you're showing the next generation and the generation from that they can grow to be in this leadership pipeline. And one of the best ways to do that is to model it. So my husband and I were talking the other day, and he said, you know what? We're the auntie and uncle now. We're not the youth. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. We're not the youth anymore. So now the 20 to 30-year-olds, they are the president and the vice president, and they're running the masjid, and we are their support. But they are only able to do that because we've modeled it. The masjid president for ISOC is in his early 30s, but he's already thinking about which youth group members are going to be the next president. And he's like, okay, we're going to make sure that they stay invested in our masjid. And We want to make sure we are empowering those future leaders. Just like I said, looking to the future, looking at your youth group, looking at your schools. Who are these people going to take and are they going to have ownership? Those are your next donors, right? Those are the where the growth and maybe the vision and the mission may change, or you want to make sure that you are just making that conscientious effort to engage and uplift and mentor. And you want to start now. I did my estate planning. I thought it would take 6 months. It took 3 years because I didn't realize how many different moving parts I had in my own little home. So if you have an organization, you need to make sure that you are constantly thinking about documentation. You're thinking about how you get that documentation done and then how you do it in your onboarding and your offboarding. Without that proper documentation, succession planning won't happen. Then somebody that comes in, if there's no will just come up with a brand new mission and vision. And it's really about owning the organization outside the people, thinking about it beyond yourself. And our prophet is the best model for succession planning. You know, he set up Islam for us now. And how many years have gone? There are tweaks. It's not the same Islam that it was during the time of our Prophet, but we have the model, we have the documentation, we have the Sunnah, and we know how to apply it. So you have to start thinking about that for yourself and how you do your succession planning for your organization. So I think I'm going to wrap it up right there.